The first sound is not a voice, nor the creak of a wooden door, but the faint, deliberate tolling of the bell. It comes from the tower, high above the cloister roof, and drifts like a slow wave through the pre-dawn mist. 1, 2, 3, the deep bronze notes roll into the sleeping countryside, telling the world, and the brothers within, that it is time for matins. The air is cold here, always colder than you expect, especially in the still hours before sunrise. The stone walls seem to keep the night inside them, holding it like a secret. You draw your cloak closer, and your feet, wrapped in worn wool, carry you down the narrow corridor. The floor is uneven underfoot, not from neglect, but from centuries of passing sandals. The monastery is not awake all at once. It stirs like an old tree in the wind, first one leaf trembling, then another. Somewhere to your left, the faint rustle of robes as a monk emerges from his cell. Somewhere ahead, the flicker of a candle, carried carefully by another, casting moving shadows along the walls. No one speaks. Words at this hour would be like stones dropped into a still pond. Instead, you hear the soft shuffle of feet on the flagstones, the sigh of a door's hinges, the gentle meeting of wood and frame as it closes behind you. The cloister, the heart of the monastery, opens under the dim light of the moon. For covered walkways enclose a square of grass, damp with dew. The air smells of earth and the faint, lingering scent of last night's incense. Above, the bell continues its patient work, calling the brothers from every corner of the cloister, from the dormitory, from the infirmary, from their cells. Beyond the cloister garth, the chapel doors stand open, spilling a narrow path of warm light into the cold dark. This is where the day truly begins, not with the sun, but with prayer. The rule of Saint Benedict calls for prayer in the small hours, long before the world stirs. To rise in darkness is to declare that the soul does not keep time by the sun alone. You step inside the chapel, and the air changes. Here it is warmer, wrapped in the faint sweetness of beeswax candles. The wooden stalls are polished by generations of elbows and hands. Above, the ribbed vaults gather the candlelight and hold it like a starry sky in stone. The chanting begins low, a single note, steady and sure, rising from the abbot's place. One by one, the other voices join, weaving a sound that is both ancient and alive. It is not music meant to entertain, but to focus the heart, to remind the mind that every breath belongs to God. The words are Latin, but the meaning seeps through without translation, mercy, gratitude, and the quiet awe of standing before the divine. Matins is long, but time here feels different. The world outside measures time in hours and minutes. The monastery measures it in prayer, in the spaces between the tolling of bells. And so you lose yourself in the rhythm, standing, sitting, bowing, as the chant moves through psalms and readings. When it ends, there is no applause, no chatter. Only the deep stillness that follows a full breath. The brothers file out in silence, the candle flames flickering in their passing. Outside, the first pale light of dawn is beginning to gather in the east, brushing the edge of the cloister garden with silver. This is the hour of quiet work, the time before the day truly belongs to its labors. Some brothers return to their cells for a moment of private prayer or scripture reading. Others begin their morning duties, tending the kitchen fire, feeding the animals, sweeping the walkways of leaves. You walk along the cloister walk, your fingers brushing the cool columns. The garden is waking too, a blackbird hops across the damp grass, the first of the bees drifts toward the herb bed, and the scent of rosemary is sharp in the fresh air. Somewhere in the distance, a stream runs over stones, its voice soft but steady. The monastery at dawn is not loud, but it is full of sound if you know how to listen. The coo of a pigeon nesting in the bell tower. The creak of a wheelbarrow as a lay brother moves compost to the garden. The faint crackle as kindling catches fire in the kitchen hearth. These are the sounds of life lived slowly, with care. For the monks, this rhythm is not new. It is the same today as it was yesterday, and as it will be tomorrow. It is the rhythm of a life shaped not by haste or ambition, but by devotion, to God, to the community, and to the steady passing of the seasons. The sun lifts a little higher, gilding the tops of the cloister walls. In another hour, the monastery will be alive with work, in the fields, in the scriptorium, in the workshops. But for now, there is only this, the cool air, the low light, the echo of the morning chant still lingering in the stones. You take a slow breath, and the smell of damp earth and wood smoke fills your lungs. Here, in the cloister at dawn, the day is not rushed into being. It is invited, gently, like a guest at the gate. And so begins another day in the monastery, much like the last, yet no less sacred for its sameness. The day in a monastery does not truly belong to the monk, it belongs to the rule. Written centuries ago by Saint Benedict of Nursia, the rule of Saint Benedict is more than a book of instructions, it is the spine upon which monastic life stands. It tells the brothers when to rise, when to work, when to pray, and when to rest. It governs speech, silence, meals, discipline, and even the smallest gestures of hospitality. It is, in the truest sense, a way of life. The rule begins with a single word, listen. Not simply with the ears, but with the heart. It calls each monk to a life of stability, obedience, and conversion of life, a daily turning toward God, and away from selfish desire. To follow the rule is to accept that your hours, your labor, your comforts, and your ambitions are no longer your own. The abbot, as the head of the monastery, is the interpreter of the rule. His role is not to invent new commands, but to embody the wisdom already given. He is father and shepherd, teacher and judge, but also servant. The rule warns the abbot against pride, reminding him that the souls of his brothers are entrusted to him. In the quiet after dawn prayers, you see the rule in motion, though no one names it. The brothers move with an order that needs no command. They know where they are meant to be, and when. The gardener takes his tools to the beds of cabbages and onions. The cook lifts the heavy iron lid from the morning's porridge. The scribe gathers his inks and parchments for the hours ahead in the scriptorium. There is no hurry in these movements, but no idleness either. Each task is done with care, as though the work itself is a form of prayer. And in truth, it is. The rule teaches that idleness is the enemy of the soul, not because rest is wrong, but because a restless mind turns too easily to distraction and temptation. Labor, whether in the fields or at the desk, is a safeguard as well as a service. Silence, too, is part of the rule. Not all day, for there are times when the brothers must speak for the sake of work, teaching, or counsel. But much of the day passes without casual conversation. This silence is not empty, it is filled with the awareness of God's presence. It allows the mind to dwell on prayer even while the hands are busy. The rule is practical as well as spiritual. It sets times for meals, not merely for health but for harmony. Too much food dulls the spirit, too little weakens the body. The brothers eat together in the refectory, listening to the reading of Scripture as they take their simple meal. Even the cook is reminded in the rule to serve with humility, for the nourishment of the body is no less important to the community than the nourishment of the soul. The rule also speaks of humility, a ladder with 12 rungs, each one a step closer to perfect obedience. The first rung is simple, to keep the fear of God always before your eyes. The last rung, the 12th, is reached when humility becomes so natural that it is no longer forced, when the monk's will and God's will are one. You watch a novice, still young in his vows, sweeping the cloister walk. His shoulders are bent, not from the weight of the broom, but from the weight of learning. He moves carefully, watching the older brothers, imitating their quiet efficiency. The rule is not memorized in a day, it is absorbed over years, until it shapes every movement, every thought. There is gentleness in the rule as well. When a brother is sick, his needs are to be met without hesitation, for Christ is served in the care of the ill. When a guest arrives, the porter greets him with the words, "Thanks be to God you have come." When a mistake is made, correction is firm but measured, always aimed at restoration rather than punishment. Saint Benedict understood that monks are human, that tempers can flare, that weariness can make a man short of patience, that pride can creep in unnoticed. The rule does not deny these truths, it offers a framework to keep them from leading the community astray. In the chapter house, the rule is read aloud each day. A single section, sometimes only a paragraph, but always with care. The words may be centuries old, but they are spoken as though fresh from the pen. Each brother listens, knowing that this same passage was heard by countless others before him, and will be heard by countless others after. The rule is not meant to bind like chains, it is meant to guide like a path. And yet, it demands more than mere agreement. It asks for surrender, not of the mind, but of the will. In surrender, there is peace. As the morning wears on, the monastery moves in quiet harmony. The bell will ring again soon, calling the brothers back to the chapel for the next office of the day. They will come not because they are ordered, but because the rule has shaped them to desire it. You begin to understand that the monastery is not simply a place where monks live. It is a living expression of the rule, stone and wood shaped into prayer, into work, into silence. The brothers are not merely following instructions, they are breathing the rule into every hour. And so the day continues, guided by words written over 1,000 years ago, yet still as steady and unyielding as the stones underfoot. The bell rings again. Its voice is different this time, not the deep, slow toll of matins in the night, but a brighter, more urgent call. The sound rolls across the cloister, through the garden, past the workshops, and into every corner of the monastery. It is the summons to lauds, the morning prayer that greets the rising sun. You see the brothers pause in their work. The gardener leaves his hoe leaning against the stone wall. The cook wipes his hands on his linen apron and covers the simmering pot. The scribe closes his inkwell, the dark liquid catching a glint of light. Each one moves without hurry but without delay, as though answering the bell is not a task but a breath, the natural next thing. The chapel stands at the heart of the monastery, not only in its position but in its purpose. Its heavy wooden doors are open, and the smell of beeswax and incense floats out into the cool morning. You step inside, and the sound changes. The outside world is muted. Here, the bell's voice is softer, absorbed by stone and wood, and replaced by the gentle shuffle of sandaled feet on the worn floor. The monks take their places in the choir stalls, long wooden seats facing each other across the center of the chapel. The abbot is already in his place, his head bowed, his hands folded. The light is different here too. Thin beams of gold fall through the high windows, cutting through the incense haze and painting the air itself. A single voice begins the chant, low, steady, and sure. It rises slowly, as if stretching toward the light. Another voice joins, then another, until the sound fills every corner of the chapel. It is not loud, yet it feels vast. The words are Latin, flowing like a river, Deus, in adjutorium meum intend, O God, come to my assistance. The chant of lauds is not hurried. Each note is given space to breathe. The monks have sung these same psalms for centuries, yet they do not sound tired. They sound timeless. You can almost feel the weight of the voices that came before, layer upon layer of devotion pressed into the stone walls. There is no instrument here but the human voice. The tones rise and fall like the tide, sometimes in unison, sometimes weaving in harmony. The rhythm is set not by a beat but by the natural flow of the words. Between verses, there are silences, not empty pauses, but spaces where the prayer sinks deeper. The psalms for lauds are chosen to meet the dawn with praise. They speak of the light driving out the darkness, of creation rejoicing in the new day, of God's mercy renewed each morning. You feel the shift in the room as the brothers sing, the night's stillness giving way to the day's first warmth. After the psalms come readings from Scripture. A brother steps forward to the lectern, the wood polished by countless hands. His voice is measured, neither rushed nor slow, carrying each word clearly. The others listen with stillness that is more than discipline, it is attentiveness, the kind that comes from years of practice in hearing, not merely listening. Then comes the Benedictus, the song of Zechariah, sung with the same calm devotion. The melody rises a little higher here, as though lifting the heart toward the light streaming through the windows. When lauds ends, there is no applause, no whispered conversation. The monks bow their heads, cross themselves, and file out in silence. The service is not a performance, it is the breath that begins the day. Outside, the sun has risen fully now. The cloister garden glows with fresh light. Dew still clings to the grass, and the stone walkways are warming underfoot. The brothers return to their tasks. Some to the fields, some to the scriptorium, some to the kitchens, but the chant lingers in the air like a fragrance. The rule says prayer is the work of God, and it is the highest work a monk can do. Yet it does not stand alone. It is woven into the whole of the day, the hours of labor, the moments of rest, the acts of service. The call to prayer comes again and again, drawing the monk back to the center, to the reason for every other task. You realize that the bell is not merely an instrument of time. It is a reminder that nothing in the monastery is truly separate from prayer. Even the simplest task, mending a robe, baking bread, tending a goat, is done in the awareness that the bell will ring, and the hands will pause, and the voice will join the ancient song. And so the monastery breathes in prayer, and breathes out labor, in a rhythm as steady as the tolling of the bell. If the chapel is the heart of the monastery, the scriptorium is its memory. It is a long, narrow room, tucked along the south wall where the sun can pour in through high, arched windows. The light here is everything. Without it, the delicate work would be impossible. Even so, it is measured and soft, not the harsh blaze of midday, but the gentle gold of a well-placed morning. You step inside, and the first thing you notice is the smell. Ink has its own fragrance, sharp, earthy, and slightly metallic. It mingles with the scent of parchment, which is smoother, like dry wood with a hint of animal hide. The air is warmer here than in the stone corridors, the windows trap the sunlight, making the room almost cozy despite the chill outside. Rows of desks line the walls, each one angled so the monk can work with the light falling cleanly across the page. Some desks are bare but for a simple inkwell and quill. Others are crowded with tools. Pen knives for sharpening nibs, rulers for keeping lines straight, small weights to hold the parchment flat. The brothers here do not speak. Their work is slow, and their concentration deep. The only sounds are the scratch of quills, the faint rustle of parchment being turned, and the occasional soft breath as a monk leans closer to his work. One brother is copying a psalter, the Book of Psalms. His script is even and precise, each letter shaped as though carved from the air. The ink is black, but at the capital letters, bright colors appear, red, blue, and gold leaf that catches the light in tiny flashes. These illuminations are not mere decoration, they are acts of devotion. Every curl of a vine, every wing of a painted angel, is a prayer in pigment. Another monk works on a book of herbal remedies. His illustrations of plants are so precise that they could guide a healer who has never seen them in life. He paints the deep green of sage, the purple of lavender, the yellow of chamomile, each petal outlined with patient care. In the monastery, knowledge is preserved not just for the monks, but for all who might come after. The scriptorium is not simply a workplace, it is a defense against forgetting. In an age when books are rare and costly, each manuscript here is a treasure. The monks know that if they do not copy these words, they may be lost forever. The rule of Saint Benedict says that during Lent, each monk should receive a book and read it from start to finish. But before such a book can be read, it must be made. And making it is no small task. A single manuscript might take months, even years, to complete. Every line must be perfect, a single blot of ink could mean scraping away the surface of the parchment and starting again. It is not easy work. The posture strains the back and neck, and the cold in winter can make the fingers stiff. The brothers wear fingerless gloves, leaving just enough freedom to guide the quill. In summer, the heat from the windows can be stifling, yet the work goes on. The copying is steady, deliberate, the pace of someone who knows he will be here for many hours, and many more days to come. From time to time, a brother pauses to rest his eyes. He looks toward the cloister garden, visible through the windows, letting the green suit the strain of close work. Then, without a word, he returns to the page. You notice that the books in progress are never left lying open without protection. When a monk steps away, he covers his work with a clean cloth, guarding it from dust, light, and the risk of accidental smudges. Some of the books here are for the monastery's own use: prayer books, hymnals, copies of scripture. Others are works of science, medicine, and history, meant to be shared with other houses or scholars. The monastery's library grows slowly, but each volume is made to last centuries. The work is repetitive, yes, but the monks do not see it as tedious. They believe that by preserving the words of the past, they serve both God and the generations to come. Each letter is a gift, passed forward through time. As midday approaches, the bell will call the scribes away to the refectory for the meal. They will set down their quills, close their inkwells, and cover their work. And when they return later in the day, they will pick up exactly where they left off, the flow of ink resuming like a river after a moment's stillness. Here in the Scriptorium, you understand something about the monastery's way of life. It is not about doing something once and moving on. It is about doing the same thing every day, with care, until the act itself becomes a form of devotion. When the air inside the Scriptorium grows warm and heavy with ink and parchment, the garden is a relief, cool, open, and fragrant. The monastic garden is not just a place for beauty. It is a living storeroom, a pharmacy, and a quiet space for meditation. Here, every plant has a purpose. The rows are orderly, each bed marked by low wooden borders. Pathways of packed earth wind between them, worn smooth by the steps of countless seasons' work. The first thing you notice is the scent. Rosemary and thyme release their sharp fragrance as you brush past. Mint grows in a shaded corner, its cool aroma carried on the breeze. The lavender, tall and purple-headed, hums softly with bees. These herbs are not only for cooking, many will be dried and stored for medicine, teas, and balms. Near the center of the garden is a section for vegetables: cabbages, leeks, onions, and beans. In spring, tender shoots push through the soil. By summer, the beds will be heavy with green life. The monks tend them with patience, watering from rain barrels, turning the soil with wooden-handled tools. To the side, fruit trees line the wall: apples, pears, and plums. In blossom season, their flowers scatter pale petals across the paths, like a benediction from the branches. By autumn, their fruit will be stored in the cool cellar, to sweeten the long winter meals. There is also the physic garden, the medicinal bed, where plants are grown for the infirmary. Here you find sage for sore throats, comfrey for healing wounds, feverfew for headaches, and valerian to soothe restless sleep. The infirmarian, often an older monk skilled in herbal remedies, knows each plant as one knows an old friend. He will walk here with his small basket, clipping stems and leaves, murmuring thanks for each gift. The garden is not silent, though it is peaceful. You hear the low hum of bees moving from flower to flower. The coo of pigeons nesting in the cloister roof. The steady scrape of a hoe as a lay brother works the soil. Occasionally, the bell rings in the distance, and all sound seems to pause for a breath. The monks work in pairs or alone, rarely speaking unless necessary. The rule encourages labor as a form of prayer, and here in the garden, that truth is easy to feel. Each seed planted is an act of hope, each wheat pulled is a small act of order in a world prone to chaos. Along one path, you notice a bench of simple wood, worn smooth by years of use. It faces a patch of wildflowers, a corner of the garden left less cultivated, where nature is allowed its own designs. Here a monk might sit in the afternoon, rosary in hand, letting the wind move through the tall grasses as he prays. Water for the garden comes from a stone well, its rope damp from the morning draw. Buckets are carried by hand or poured into channels that feed the beds. In dry seasons, watering is a task that begins before the sun climbs high and ends only when the last shadows lengthen across the wall. The garden also teaches patience. No matter how skilled the gardener, the plants grow in their own time. There is no rushing the ripening of fruit, no forcing the mint to sprout in winter. The monks accept this rhythm, trusting that the seasons will bring what is needed. When harvest time comes, the garden's bounty is gathered with care. Some vegetables go straight to the kitchen, where they will be chopped for stew or boiled with grains. Herbs are tied in bundles and hung from the beams of the drying room. Fruit is stored or preserved. Nothing is wasted, even the scraps feed the compost heap, which in turn will nourish next year's beds. But the garden is more than food and medicine. It is also a place of teaching. Novices learn here how to plant, prune, and tend, not only to feed the body but to understand the patience and humility such work requires. The abbot, though busy with many duties, sometimes walks through the garden in the evening. His presence is quiet, but the brothers notice it. He will pause to run his hand over the lavender, or to taste a sprig of parsley, or to stand for a moment under the apple trees, looking toward the setting sun. In the monastery, the garden is as much a part of the soul as the chapel. Here, life is nurtured by steady, unseen work, the same work that shapes the heart in prayer. When you leave the garden and return to the cloister walk, the scent of rosemary and earth follows you. It lingers, a reminder that even the simplest acts, planting, watering, weeding, can be offerings, if done with love. The bell rings for the midday meal. It is not a hurried call, not the sharp clang of urgency, but a steady, measured toll, as if reminding everyone that nourishment, too, is part of devotion. The monks come from every corner of the monastery, from the garden, the fields, the scriptorium, the workshops. Their pace is even, neither rushed nor slow. Sandals whisper across the cloister walk, robes swaying in rhythm with their steps. The refectory, the dining hall, is a long room with high windows on one side and plain wooden tables running its length. The air smells faintly of baked bread, root vegetables, and the herbs that flavored the stew simmering since morning. At the far end stands a lectern. A single brother climbs the steps and opens a book. Today it is the life of the saints. His voice will be the only one heard during the meal. In the monastery, eating is done in silence, so that the mind can listen while the body is fed. Each monk takes his place, standing behind his bench until the abbot gives the signal. Then, as one, they bow their heads for the blessing, oculi omnium in te sperant, Domini, the eyes of all look to you, O Lord. Only after this prayer do they sit. Wooden bowls and spoons are simple, well worn. The bread, round and crusty, is passed along the table. Each monk breaks his portion silently. The stew is ladled into bowls, a thick mixture of barley, carrots, leeks, and cabbage, with the rich flavor of herbs from the garden. On days of fasting, the fare is even plainer, but never wasteful. As they eat, the reader's voice fills the hall, steady and clear. The story of a martyr, the wisdom of a desert hermit, the teachings of a church father, these words accompany the meal as surely as the bread and stew. It is a reminder that spiritual nourishment is not separate from physical sustenance. The sound in the refectory is like no other dining hall. There is no clatter of conversation, no competing voices. Only the occasional scrape of a spoon, the soft tearing of bread, and the voice from the lectern, rising and falling in a rhythm that matches the measured pace of eating. At one point, a lay brother moves quietly down the aisle, refilling bowls or replacing a loaf. Even his movements are deliberate, respectful of the silence. He sets each dish down without a word, without the faintest thud. The rule of Saint Benedict is clear: the refectory is a place for temperance. Meals are neither rushed nor drawn out. No one takes more than he needs, and nothing is hoarded for later. The food is simple, but prepared with care, and always eaten together. On feast days, there may be a little cheese, a bit of fish, or a sweeter bread. On fast days, perhaps only bread and broth. But regardless of the menu, the manner is the same: quiet, orderly, grateful. You notice how even the act of eating is made part of prayer here. The brothers do not simply feed themselves, they receive what is given, mindful that it comes from God, through the labor of many hands: the gardener, the cook, the baker, the ones who fetched water, chopped wood, or washed the bowls. When the meal is finished, the abbot gives a signal. All rise together, and a prayer of thanks is said. The reader closes the book, and only then does the refectory fill with the faint sounds of movement, benches sliding, bowls stacked, tables wiped. Still no idle chatter. That will not come until the day's work is done and the great silence begins after Compline. Outside, the midday sun lies warm on the cloister garden. The monks return to their duties, their steps unhurried, their faces calm. The meal has filled their bodies, but it has also reinforced something deeper, the sense that even the most ordinary acts, when done with discipline and gratitude, become sacred. Here, bread is not just bread. Silence is not emptiness. Together, they are a reminder that the body and the soul do not live apart, but side by side, fed in the same moment. The monastery gate stands tall but unadorned, a heavy wooden structure bound with black iron bands. Beyond it lies the road, sometimes quiet for days, sometimes busy with the shuffle of pilgrims' feet or the slow creak of a merchant's cart. By the rule of Saint Benedict, any visitor, no matter how unexpected, is to be received as Christ himself. That law is carved not in stone but in habit, alive in the way the porter, the monk assigned to guard the gate, listens for the faintest knock. It is mid-afternoon when a sound comes. Not the bold rap of a nobleman's envoy, but the soft, hesitant tap of someone unsure they belong. The porter opens the small hatch in the gate and peers out. A pilgrim stands there, cloak dusty from the road, staff worn smooth from use, a leather satchel hanging from one shoulder. His face is weathered, but his eyes carry a mix of weariness and hope. Without asking long questions, the porter opens the gate wide. The first words are always a blessing. Deo gratias, thanks be to God. Then the pilgrim is led inside. Just beyond the gate is a small room where guests are welcomed. It is plain, but warmer than the road. The abbot himself comes, for in the monastery's eyes, no guest is too small for the highest honor. He bows slightly and offers water for the pilgrim's hands and feet. In an age before hot baths, this is no small comfort. The guest is seated, and a simple meal is brought, bread still warm from the oven, a bowl of stew, and a cup of watered wine. The pilgrim eats in gratitude, speaking only when asked. After the meal, a monk leads him to the guest house, a building just inside the wall, separate from the monk's own quarters. Here, travelers may rest without disturbing the rhythm of monastic life, but still under its care. Some guests stay only a night, others for weeks. A pilgrim on the road to Santiago or Rome might stop for shelter, a scholar might come to read in the monastery's library. A poor farmer, ruined by bad harvest, might seek charity. Each is met with the same manner, without judgment, without haste. The monastery is not rich, but it gives freely from what it has. In the eyes of the brothers, the act of receiving a stranger is an act of receiving Christ. And so, the guest is not just tolerated but honored. Evening comes, and the porter once again checks the gate. Sometimes it is locked for the night, sometimes left ajar for a late traveler. In winter, snow might drift against the threshold, in summer, the scent of the fields beyond might drift in. But always, the gate is more than wood and iron. It is a symbol, the line between the world outside, with its noise and uncertainty, and the ordered peace within, yet the monks know this peace is not for them alone. Hospitality is part of their service to God, as essential as prayer or labor. The road will always bring people, some with stories, some with needs, some with both. The monastery's task is to be ready, with bread for the hungry. When night falls, the porter closes the hatch one last time. The gate stands quiet under the stars, and the guest sleeps soundly in the small, warm room. Tomorrow he will rise before dawn to join the monks in prayer, if he wishes, before taking again to the road. And when he leaves, he will carry more than a full stomach. He will carry the memory of a place where the world's sharp edges softened, if only for a short while, where a closed door opened without suspicion, and a stranger was treated as a brother. Just beyond the cloister, in a space where the walls shelter the air from harsh winds, lies the monastery garden. Here, order reigns not only in prayer and scripture but also in soil and leaf. Paths of packed earth divide the garden into neat rectangles. Each bed is carefully planned, for the monks understand that a garden is both science and devotion. At first glance, it is simple: low wooden borders, rows of herbs, patches of vegetables, the faint shimmer of fruit trees at the far end. But to the brothers who tend it, every plant has a purpose: for food, for medicine, or for the fragrance that lifts the heart toward heaven. Brother Matthew, the gardener, moves slowly along the rows, his brown habit brushing against thyme and sage. His hands, though calloused from years of work, handle each stem as if it were fragile parchment. He knows when the lettuce will bolt, when the leeks are ready to pull, when the first strawberries will blush red in the sun. The scent here is unlike anywhere else in the monastery: rosemary warmed by the morning light, damp soil after a night's rain, the faint sweetness of chamomile flowers. Bees hum lazily between blooms, and a robin perches on the edge of a raised bed, cocking its head as if listening to the gardener's muttered prayers. The rule of Saint Benedict calls for monks to live by the labor of their own hands, and here that command is fulfilled. In spring, the garden bursts with green, peas climbing thin wooden poles, tender leaves pushing through dark soil. In summer, it is a riot of life, the air heavy with the promise of harvest. Autumn brings baskets of apples, onions plated together for storage, and herbs hung in bunches to dry. Even in winter, the garden serves: hardy kale stands against frost, and roots stored in the cellar keep the kitchen busy. Yet the garden is more than a place for food. It is a place of healing. Tucked near the eastern wall is the physic garden, where medicinal herbs grow in carefully marked plots. Here are the bitter leaves of yarrow for wounds, the purple blooms of lavender to soothe the mind, and the golden flowers of calendula for skin ailments. Brother Matthew knows their uses well. His small wooden shed holds jars of dried leaves, oils steeping in clay pots, and bundles of roots hung from the rafters. The infirmarian, the monk who tends to the sick, often comes here with his basket. Together, he and the gardener speak quietly over the plants, deciding which will be gathered for the week's remedies. In this way, the garden feeds both body and spirit, its abundance shared with guests, travelers, and the poor at the gate. But there is another layer to the garden's meaning. For the monks, it is a reflection of the soul's care. Just as weeds must be pulled before they choke the plants, so must sin and distraction be removed from the heart. The gardener's patience becomes a silent sermon: one row weeded at a time, one vine trained along the trellis, one stubborn root dug out by hand. At midday, when the sun climbs high, the garden is still. The only movement is the slow turning of leaves toward the light. The bell in the cloister calls the brothers to prayer, and Brother Matthew leaves his tools neatly by the shed. Even in his absence, the garden seems to pray, a hymn of green and gold offered to the sky. By late afternoon, shadows stretch across the beds. The day's work is done: weeds in a pile, watering can empty, young plants set in their new soil. The air cools, and the scent of mint rises as footsteps brush its leaves. A dove coos softly from the roof of the garden wall. In the quiet of evening, the garden becomes a place of meditation. A monk may walk here alone after vespers, listening to the rustle of leaves in the breeze, feeling the rhythm of creation continue without hurry. In these moments, the garden is not only a source of food or medicine, it is a reminder that the world outside the walls, for all its troubles, still contains beauty and order. When darkness falls, the gate to the garden is closed. The plants rest, gathering strength for the next day. And within the monastery, the brothers do the same, their hearts tended with the same care as the earth outside. The library is not vast like those of great cities, yet to the monks, it is a treasure beyond gold. It is housed in a long, cool chamber above the cloister walk, where the thick stone walls keep the air dry and the light dim, for too much sun would fade the ink. Shelves of dark oak line the walls, holding not hundreds but dozens of volumes, each one worth months, sometimes years, of labor. Many are bound in leather, their covers stamped with patterns, their pages thick and uneven at the edges. Some are newly written, their colors still vivid, others are old, their parchment yellowed and their margins crowded with notes from long dead hands. The smell here is like no other, a blend of old leather, dust, and something faintly sweet from the vellum. When you step inside, the world outside falls away. The only sound is the quiet creak of wood underfoot and, sometimes, the rustle of a page turned slowly, reverently. Not far from the library lies the Scriptorium, the workshop where these books are born. It is a bright room by monastic standards, narrow windows admit steady, indirect light, and the desks are arranged so that no shadow falls on the parchment from a scribe's writing hand. Each desk holds the tools of the trade, sharpened quills, small knives for scraping mistakes, pots of black ink, and sometimes pigments of red, blue, and gold for illuminated capitals. Sheets of parchment lie in neat piles, weighed down to prevent curling. The work is slow. A monk may spend a morning carefully ruling faint lines on the page, then an afternoon copying only a few verses from scripture or a commentary. Each letter must be even, each word spaced to please the eye. If an error is made, it can be scraped away with the knife and the surface smoothed, but this is done sparingly, for parchment is costly. Brother Anselm, the master scribe, moves from desk to desk, checking the work of younger monks. He corrects a crooked letter here, adjusts a margin there. His own desk is a study in precision, tools laid out in perfect order, inks mixed to just the right shade. Illumination is an art in itself. When a manuscript calls for beauty as well as clarity, an illuminator takes over. He may work for hours on a single initial letter, filling it with twisting vines, small creatures, or even tiny scenes. Gold leaf is applied with a steady hand, catching the light like a drop of sunlight on the page. The texts copied here are not all religious, though scripture is the heart of the work. The monks also preserve writings of the Church Fathers, works of philosophy, medicine, and history. Some of these come from distant lands, brought by travelers or exchanged with other monasteries. To the brothers, each book is a voice from the past, a spark of wisdom worth protecting. The scriptorium is silent but for the scratch of quills. Conversation is rare, the work demands focus. Yet there is a shared sense of purpose, an unspoken understanding that each letter copied is an act of devotion. For in preserving these words, the monks believe they are serving both God and generations yet unborn. Sometimes, on winter evenings, when the light fades early and the work must pause, the brothers will sit in the library by candlelight, reading aloud. One voice carries through the dim room, while the others listen, the flicker of the flames dancing on their faces. It may be a psalm, a sermon from centuries past, or a passage from a book of natural history describing creatures most have never seen. In this way, knowledge is shared not only through the eye but through the ear, binding the community together. The library is also a place of quiet refuge. A monk burdened by doubt or weariness may climb the stairs and sit among the shelves, letting his hands rest on the cool leather bindings. Here, among the wisdom of the ages, his thoughts settle like dust on a still floor. When the abbot speaks of the monastery's wealth, he does not mean gold or silver. He gestures to the shelves and says, "Here is our treasure, and our duty." For books are fragile things, and without constant care, they vanish. Fire, damp, neglect, any of these could erase the work of years in a moment. So the monks keep their vigil not only in prayer but in ink. Each day, they pass on what they have received, their careful lines linking past to present, present to future. By the time the bell calls them to Compline, the desks are cleared, the tools cleaned, the precious pages stored away. The room grows dim, and the silence deepens, holding the day's work like a closed book. A monastic cell is a world reduced to its simplest form, a place stripped of everything except what the soul needs. Step through the low wooden door and you find yourself in a room no larger than a storage cupboard in a great manor house. Yet to the monk, it is enough. The walls are plain plaster, sometimes whitewashed, sometimes left bare so that the rough texture of the stone beneath shows through. A narrow window, no bigger than a folded handkerchief, admits a thread of daylight. Its sill is deep, the air cool. In winter, the glass, if there is glass, will frost over, dimming the already pale light. Against one wall sits the bed, a simple wooden frame with a thin straw mattress. The blanket is coarse wool, its weave loose but warm. Beside it, a small stool may serve as both seat and table. Here a monk might place his psalter, a candle stub, perhaps a wooden cup. Clothing is hung on a peg, his habit, perhaps a spare tunic, and a pair of sandals resting neatly beneath. The floor is plain boards or stone, swept daily but showing the marks of long use. There are no paintings, no ornaments, no clutter. The cell is not meant to please the eye but to free the mind. Every object has a purpose, nothing remains that does not serve. This spareness is deliberate, for in removing the distractions of the world, the monk hopes to hear more clearly the quiet voice of God. The cell is both refuge and testing ground. In the silence, one hears one's own thoughts more loudly. The day's work fades, the chatter of the refectory recedes, and what remains is the steady rhythm of breath, the beating of the heart. Some monks find this peace, others wrestle with it. Night in the cell is its own experience. After Compline, the final prayers of the day, the brothers file to their rooms by candlelight. The corridors are cool and still, the only sound is the shuffle of sandals on stone. Once inside, each monk closes his door and kneels for a final moment of private prayer. The darkness settles like a cloak. In winter, the straw mattress crackles faintly as the monk turns, drawing his blanket tight. The air smells faintly of wool and wood smoke from the distant kitchen fires. Outside, the wind may rattle the shutters, or rain may patter softly on the roof. If he wakes in the small hours, the monk may light his candle to read or to pray the night office, especially on vigils. The tiny flame throws long shadows across the walls, making the cell seem even smaller. In those moments, time feels suspended, the monastery is asleep, the world beyond its walls forgotten. The cell is also the place of private study. A monk may sit on his stool, book in hand, lips moving silently as his eyes trace the lines. The words are not hurried, they are savored, repeated until they sink into memory. Learning here is not about speed, but about depth. On some days, the cell becomes a place of rest from illness or exhaustion. The infirmary might bring a cup of broth, or another brother might read aloud from a devotional text. Care is given quietly, without fuss, for the rhythm of the monastery does not pause even for the sick. The cell's door, though plain, is a threshold of discipline. To cross it is to step into a space of solitude. The rule of silence is strong here, even if two cells share a wall, no words are exchanged through it. In this way, each monk's interior life is protected. Yet despite its simplicity, the cell is not cold or impersonal. Over years, it takes on the shape of its inhabitant. The straw of the mattress settles in the same places night after night. The edges of the psalter's cover wear smooth under the same pair of hands. A small polished spot may appear on the windowsill where he rests his elbow to look outside. And outside, that narrow slice of the world visible through the cell's window is often a monk's only view of the changing seasons. In spring, a strip of green meadow; in summer, the buzz of bees drifting past. In autumn, the red and gold of leaves tumbling in the wind; in winter, the clean white of snow under moonlight. The monk returns to this cell at the end of each day, as surely as the sun sets. It is the place where he lays down not just his body, but the burdens of the hours. Here, in the smallest of spaces, he seeks the widest of horizons, the inner stillness that the monastery was built to protect. By the time the morning bell calls him to lauds, the candle is out, the blanket folded back, the door open to the cool air of the corridor. Another day begins, and the cell waits quietly for night to come again. Step out from the dim quiet of the monastic cell and you find yourself in the cloister, a place that is at once corridor, courtyard, and living heartbeat of the monastery. The cloister walk is a covered passageway that runs along all four sides of an open square. Its floor is worn stone, smoothed by centuries of sandaled feet. The arches rise gracefully overhead, framing the open garth at the center, a small patch of tended grass, sometimes with a well, a sundial, or a single tree at its heart. Beyond the arches, sunlight spills into the square, warming the green and casting long shadows across the walk. Here, monks move like the slow hands of a clock, pacing between tasks. The cloister connects the great church, the chapter house, the refectory, and the dormitory, all the most essential spaces. It is the artery through which the life of the monastery flows. Silence reigns, but it is not the emptiness of absence, it is the fullness of presence. The sound of sandals scuffing the stone mingles with the rustle of habits. Somewhere in the garth, a blackbird may sing, or the breeze may carry the scent of lavender from a border of herbs. The cloister is a place for walking meditation. Some monks trace the square slowly, eyes lowered, hands hidden in their sleeves, reciting psalms beneath their breath. Each step is measured, each turn deliberate, as if the body itself were praying. At certain hours, a novice might be found here reading aloud to himself, his voice soft but steady, the words rising and falling under the vaults. Another monk might sit on a low bench, repairing a torn habit with careful stitches, the needle flashing briefly in the sun. In winter, the cloister is cold, the stone floors biting through thin sandals. Breath fogs in the air, and the open garth may lie under a thin crust of snow. Yet even then, the walk is used, for it is the thread that links all things. A monk might pull his hood low, shoulders hunched against the wind, hurrying from the scriptorium to the warmth of the refectory. The cloister also serves as a silent witness to private trials. A young novice, troubled by his studies or by the weight of the vows he must take, may pace its length in solitude, the rhythm of his steps matching the rhythm of his thoughts. The walk becomes a space for inward turning, for quiet wrestling with the soul. From time to time, visiting guests pass through. The monastery's porter leads them along the cloister to the guest house, their voices hushed in awe. They glance at the carved capitals atop the columns, leaves, vines, and sometimes small faces peeking out, each a mark of the mason's hand from generations past. In spring, the garth blooms. Bees hover lazily over the flowers, and swallows dart through the open arches. The sunlight warms the stone until it is pleasant to rest a palm against it. Monks may pause here briefly between duties, taking in the changing sky. At night, the cloister changes entirely. After Compline, its arches open onto darkness, the garth a shadowy square. The moon casts pale light along the paving stones, and the echo of a lone set of footsteps may carry from one side to another. The quiet is so deep it feels like a presence, wrapping the walk in stillness. Rain in the cloister has its own music. The drops fall into the garth, pattering on leaves, while the roof above the walkway channels water into carved spouts. The scent of wet stone rises, and the air grows cool and clean. Some monasteries keep a small garden in the garth, not for vegetables, but for contemplation. A single tree, perhaps an apple or a yew, stands at the center, with four paths meeting there in the shape of a cross. It is a living reminder of paradise in the heart of the cloister's stone embrace. Though simple in form, the cloister is the true meeting point of monastic life, the place where movement, rest, and reflection weave together. It is where the monk learns that even a path walked many times can reveal new light if taken with attention. And when the great bell calls to the next office, the cloister gathers its walkers like a tide. They flow toward the church, leaving the square behind, only to return again, hour after hour, day after day, year after year, until the stones themselves seem to carry the memory of every step. Step out from the cloister's long shadow, and you come to a heavy wooden door bound with iron. Beyond it lies the chapter house, the mind and voice of the monastery. If the cloister is the artery, here is the heart's council chamber, where decisions are made and discipline is maintained. The room is most often built on the east side of the cloister, close to the church. Its walls are of thick stone, sometimes softened with plaster, and its windows are narrow yet sufficient to pour a gentle light over the gathering. The air inside is cooler than the cloister, still, and touched with the faint scent of wax and parchment. Benches line the walls in a square, so that each monk, from the abbot to the youngest novice, can see the others. There is no throne, even the abbot's seat, though larger, is not elevated much above the rest. Here, all sit as brothers under the same vows. The chapter house takes its name from the daily reading of a chapter from the rule. Most often the rule of Saint Benedict, whose words shape the rhythm and spirit of monastic life. At dawn, after prime, the monks gather here in silence. The sound of sandals brushing over stone echoes faintly until all have taken their places. The abbot gives a nod, and a monk steps forward to read. His voice is steady and measured, the words flowing like clear water, lines about humility, obedience, work, and prayer. These words are centuries old, yet they land in the present moment as if they had been spoken for today. After the reading, there is time for counsel. The abbot may speak of the day's duties, of guests to be welcomed, of repairs to be made in the granary or the scriptorium. The cellarer might rise to report on the stores of grain, or the infirmarian may speak of a brother in need of rest. If discipline must be given, it is done here, calmly, without cruelty, but with firmness. A monk who has broken silence or failed in his task may be asked to reflect, to take on extra work, or to sit apart for a time. The purpose is not to punish for its own sake, but to restore harmony in the community. On more solemn days, the chapter house holds the weight of greater matters, the election of a new abbot, the settling of disputes, the decision to send monks to found a new house. At such times, the air is thick with thought. Each man listens, prays inwardly, and speaks when moved. The unity of the monastery is forged here, word by word. The architecture of the chapter house reflects this purpose. Some are plain, simple whitewashed walls, bare benches, and a single crucifix. Others are richly carved, with ribbed vaults and patterned floors, their columns sprouting capitals of leaves, beasts, or biblical scenes. Whatever the style, the space is always designed to hold both sound and silence well. Step out from the cloister's long shadow, and you come to a heavy wooden door bound with iron. Beyond it lies the chapter house, the mind and voice of the monastery. If the cloister is the artery, here is the heart's council chamber, where decisions are made and discipline is maintained. The room is most often built on the east side of the cloister, close to the church. Its walls are of thick stone, sometimes softened with plaster, and its windows are narrow yet sufficient to pour a gentle light over the gathering. The air inside is cooler than the cloister, still, and touched with the faint scent of wax and parchment. Benches line the walls in a square, so that each monk, from the abbot to the youngest novice, can see the others. There is no throne, even the abbot's seat, though larger, is not elevated much above the rest. Here, all sit as brothers under the same vows. The chapter house takes its name from the daily reading of a chapter from the rule. Most often the rule of Saint Benedict, whose words shape the rhythm and spirit of monastic life. At dawn, after prime, the monks gather here in silence. The sound of sandals brushing over stone echoes faintly until all have taken their places. The abbot gives a nod, and a monk steps forward to read. His voice is steady and measured, the words flowing like clear water, lines about humility, obedience, work, and prayer. These words are centuries old, yet they land in the present moment as if they had been spoken for today. After the reading, there is time for counsel. The abbot may speak of the day's duties, of guests to be welcomed, of repairs to be made in the granary or the scriptorium. The cellarer might rise to report on the stores of grain, or the infirmarian may speak of a brother in need of rest. If discipline must be given, it is done here, calmly, without cruelty, but with firmness. A monk who has broken silence or failed in his task may be asked to reflect, to take on extra work, or to sit apart for a time. The purpose is not to punish for its own sake, but to restore harmony in the community. On more solemn days, the chapter house holds the weight of greater matters, the election of a new abbot, the settling of disputes, the decision to send monks to found a new house. At such times, the air is thick with thought. Each man listens, prays inwardly, and speaks when moved. The unity of the monastery is forged here, word by word. The architecture of the chapter house reflects this purpose. Some are plain, simple whitewashed walls, bare benches, and a single crucifix. Others are richly carved, with ribbed vaults and patterned floors, their columns sprouting capitals of leaves, beasts, or biblical scenes. Whatever the style, the space is always designed to hold both sound and silence well. From the cool solemnity of the chapter house, the monks pass through a covered passage to the refectory, the dining hall of the monastery. Here, the body is fed as faithfully as the spirit. Yet even here, the Benedictine rhythm holds. There is order, humility, and a quiet sense of sacred purpose. The refectory is often a long, rectangular room, its ceiling vaulted or timbered, with windows high on the walls to let in light without distraction from the outside world. Along the sides run long wooden tables and benches, polished smooth by centuries of use. At the far end, slightly raised, is the abbot's table, from which he can see all his brethren. Before each meal, the monks wash their hands in a stone basin or at a trough set in the cloister wall, the water flowing through a carved spout. This simple act is more than cleanliness, it is a preparation, a reminder that the table is a place of fellowship and gratitude. When the bell sounds for the meal, the monks enter in silence, bowing slightly toward the crucifix or image of Christ at the head of the hall. They take their places without hurry, their movements measured and mindful. The abbot gives a blessing, and the meal begins. But here there is no idle conversation. According to the rule, meals are eaten in silence, with a single monk, the reader, standing at a lectern to read aloud. His voice carries through the hall, filling it with the words of Scripture, the lives of the saints, or spiritual reflections. The monks listen as they eat, the nourishment of the mind mingling with the nourishment of the body. The fare is simple, yet carefully prepared. Bread, cheese, and vegetables form the foundation of most meals, with fish on certain days. Meat is rare, reserved for the sick or the infirm. On feast days, the table may hold extra dishes, fruit, honey, perhaps a little wine. All is served in moderation, for gluttony is as much to be avoided as idleness. Each monk has his set place, and the portions are shared equally. The cellarer, who oversees the monastery's stores, ensures that no one receives more than another, for in the eyes of God, all are the same. The food is plain, but there is a quiet richness in the act of eating together, each man bound to the same rule, the same table. The refectory's walls are often bare stone, but some are painted with frescoes of biblical scenes or the Last Supper, as a constant reminder of the divine meal. The high windows cast soft light down the length of the room, illuminating the steam rising from bowls, the sheen of fresh bread, the bowed heads of the brethren. In winter, the air may be heavy with the smell of soup and the faint smoke from a hearth. In summer, the windows are open to let in the warm air, and the distant sound of birdsong drifts inside. Whatever the season, the meal remains a calm and ordered ritual. When the reading ends and the last piece of bread is eaten, the abbot gives thanks, and all stand. The monks file out in silence. The sun has dipped low beyond the monastery walls, and the final light of day filters through narrow windows, casting long stripes of gold across the worn wooden floorboards. The monks make their way quietly from the cloister toward the dormitory, the place where they will take their rest before the bell calls them to rise again. Unlike the lavish bedchambers of lords and nobles, the dormitory is a model of simplicity. It is often one large, open hall, built above the cloister or along the east range of the monastery so that the morning light will be the first to greet its occupants. A high roof, with exposed beams darkened by age and smoke, shelters the long rows of narrow beds. Each monk's bed is little more than a wooden frame or a simple pallet stuffed with straw. Some may have a coarse woolen blanket, dyed in muted tones, browns, grays, or the occasional faded blue. A small chest at the foot holds the monk's few personal items. His habit, his belt, perhaps a rosary or a well-worn prayer book. Here, privacy is rare. The beds are set side by side, separated at most by a low partition. This is by design. The life of a monk is one of community, and even in sleep, the brethren remain together, as one body. The open hall also makes it easier for the abbot or prior to ensure discipline is kept. Before entering the dormitory, the monks have ended their day with Compline, the final prayer service, spoken in the soft light of candles. Compline is often followed by the Great Silence, a period during which no words are spoken until after morning prayers. This silence seeps naturally into the dormitory, where the only sounds are the creak of wood, the rustle of blankets, and the faint sigh of wind through the shutters. In winter, the hall can be cold, the air biting at the nose and fingertips. The monks sleep fully clothed in their habits for warmth, their breath misting faintly in the dark. In summer, the air is softer, carrying the scents of herbs from the garden and the hum of crickets beyond the walls. Rising in the middle of the night is part of the monastic discipline. The dormitory is connected directly to the church by a night stair, a steep set of worn stone steps that lead from the sleeping quarters into the heart of the monastery. When the bell rings for matins, often in the deep stillness before dawn, the monks rise without hesitation. They dress quickly in the dim light, the straw crackling under their feet, and move together toward the stair, the sound of bare footsteps echoing in the quiet. There is no lingering in bed, no indulgence in the warmth of the blankets. The rule demands promptness and obedience, for the hours of prayer are sacred. Even the youngest novices learn this habit quickly, for to be late is to disturb the rhythm of the whole community. During the day, the dormitory stands empty. The windows let in shafts of light that fall across the beds, dust motes drifting lazily in the still air. The room has a faint. The sun has dipped low beyond the monastery walls, and the final light of day filters through narrow windows, casting long stripes of gold across the worn wooden floorboards. The monks make their way quietly from the cloister toward the dormitory, the place where they will take their rest before the bell calls them to rise again. Unlike the lavish bedchambers of lords and nobles, the dormitory is a model of simplicity. It is often one large, open hall, built above the cloister or along the east range of the monastery so that the morning light will be the first to greet its occupants. A high roof, with exposed beams darkened by age and smoke, shelters the long rows of narrow beds. Each monk's bed is little more than a wooden frame or a simple pallet stuffed with straw. Some may have a coarse woolen blanket, dyed in muted tones, browns, grays, or the occasional faded blue. A small chest at the foot holds the monk's few personal items. His habit, his belt, perhaps a rosary or a well-worn prayer book. Here, privacy is rare. The beds are set side by side, separated at most by a low partition. This is by design. The life of a monk is one of community, and even in sleep, the brethren remain together, as one body. The open hall also makes it easier for the abbot or prior to ensure discipline is kept. Before entering the dormitory, the monks have ended their day with Compline, the final prayer service, spoken in the soft light of candles. Compline is often followed by the Great Silence, a period during which no words are spoken until after morning prayers. This silence seeps naturally into the dormitory, where the only sounds are the creak of wood, the rustle of blankets, and the faint sigh of wind through the shutters. In winter, the hall can be cold, the air biting at the nose and fingertips. The monks sleep fully clothed in their habits for warmth, their breath misting faintly in the dark. In summer, the air is softer, carrying the scents of herbs from the garden and the hum of crickets beyond the walls. Rising in the middle of the night is part of the monastic discipline. The dormitory is connected directly to the church by a night stair, a steep set of worn stone steps that lead from the sleeping quarters into the heart of the monastery. When the bell rings for matins, often in the deep stillness before dawn, the monks rise without hesitation. They dress quickly in the dim light, the straw crackling under their feet, and move together toward the stair, the sound of bare footsteps echoing in the quiet. There is no lingering in bed, no indulgence in the warmth of the blankets. The rule demands promptness and obedience, for the hours of prayer are sacred. Even the youngest novices learn this habit quickly, for to be late is to disturb the rhythm of the whole community. During the day, the dormitory stands empty. The windows let in shafts of light that fall across the beds, dust motes drifting lazily in the still air. The room has a faint. At the center of the garden, the fountain murmurs softly, its stream of water a constant thread of sound that soothes the ear and anchors the mind. The water may come from a spring channeled into the monastery centuries ago, cool and clear as the mountain streams from which it flows. In summer, the trickle catches the sunlight, casting ripples of light on the surrounding stone. In winter, a thin skin of ice forms at its edges, but the sound of flowing water persists, a reminder that life continues even in stillness. Around the garden beds grow plants chosen with care. There are medicinal herbs, sage, rosemary, thyme, and mint, that the infirmarian gathers for remedies. Lavender blooms in soft purple spikes, bringing its scent to the cloister walk. Marigolds and roses are planted not for decoration alone, but for use in making oils and balms. A small patch may be set aside for vegetables, onions, leeks, and beans that will find their way to the refectory. The monks work here in silence, bending over the soil in the early morning when the air is cool. Their tools are simple, wooden-handled hoes, small trowels, baskets for the harvest. Each movement is steady and unhurried, for gardening is not a chore to be rushed but a form of prayer, a living reminder of God's creation and man's role in tending it. The cloister garden also serves as a space for study and reflection. A monk may walk the perimeter, his fingers tracing the carved stone columns, as he commits a psalm to memory. Another might pause on a bench in the corner, opening a worn manuscript to read by the soft light of morning. The air here is often filled with birdsong, sparrows nesting in the rafters, doves cooing in the shadows, and swallows darting across the square of sky. The garden changes with the seasons, and the monks welcome each shift as part of the divine order. In spring, pale blossoms appear, the air heavy with the promise of growth. In summer, the herbs are thick and fragrant, and the fountain sparkles under the sun. Autumn brings the harvest, the colors turning rich and deep, and winter strips the beds bare, leaving them resting under frost and snow. There is a spiritual symbolism here that no monk overlooks. The cloister garden, enclosed and sheltered, mirrors the monastic life, protected from the world, ordered, and dedicated to the flourishing of the soul. The central fountain, from which life-giving water flows, represents the living Word of God, nourishing all that grows within the walls. In the evenings, as the day winds down, a hush falls even deeper over the cloister garden. The fading light touches the stone arches in gold, and the air cools. Monks returning from their tasks may pass through, their robes brushing the path, a nod of greeting replacing any spoken word. Some linger for a moment by the fountain before continuing to Compline. If the cloister garden is the monastery's open-air heart, the scriptorium is its quiet mind. Here, within thick stone walls and under the steady glow of daylight streaming through narrow windows, the written word is guarded, copied, and given new life. The scriptorium is not a place of idle conversation. It is long and rectangular, lined with heavy wooden desks, each angled slightly to hold a manuscript. The desks face the light, for candles are seldom used during the day, their flicker too unsteady for such delicate work. Shafts of sunlight fall in pale rectangles across the desks, warming the wood and illuminating the ink-stained hands that labor there. The air carries a faint scent of parchment, smooth sheets made from stretched and scraped animal skin, and the sharp tang of iron gall ink, brewed from oak galls, water, and vinegar. A quiet scratching sound fills the room, the slow rhythm of quills moving across the page. Each monk in the scriptorium works with care, for a single slip could spoil hours of labor. The letters must be even, their lines straight, their spacing precise. There is no room here for haste. Some monks copy sacred scripture, while others preserve the works of ancient scholars, poets, or historians. Every word is a prayer, every stroke of the quill an offering. Illuminators sit near the end of the room, where their work requires more space and light. They prepare pigments from ground minerals, plants, and even insects, deep blues from lapis lazuli, bright reds from cinnabar, gold leaf beaten thin as breath. Their tools are brushes fine as a single hair, and their task is to bring light and color to the page, curling vines that wind through the margins, small scenes painted in miniature, gilded initials that blaze like captured sunlight. The scriptorium is ruled by order and routine. At the start of the day, a prayer is said for guidance and clarity of mind. Work begins in silence, broken only by the toll of the bell for the hours. When the bell rings, quills are laid down, pigments covered, and the monks file out together to the chapel or refectory. When they return, they take up their work exactly where they left off, as if no time had passed. The master scribe oversees the room, moving quietly from desk to desk. His trained eye catches uneven lines, faded ink, or small errors that must be corrected before the page can be bound. He carries no voice of scolding, only the calm authority of one who has spent decades in the service of the written word. There is a sense of purpose here that reaches beyond the walls. The monks know that their work will outlive them. The books they copy may travel far beyond the monastery, carried to other abbeys, universities, or noble courts. Some will survive for centuries, holding safe the knowledge and prayers of generations. In this way, the scriptorium is a bridge between the past and the present, between distant lands and this quiet corner of stone and wood. Tucked away in a quieter corner of the monastery, away from the bustle of the kitchen and the echo of the cloister walk, lies the infirmary. It is not grand, nor is it meant to be. Here, the work is gentle, patient, and necessary, the tending of bodies that falter under illness, age, or the strain of daily labor. The infirmary is a long room with low ceilings, built for warmth rather than grandeur. Small windows let in slivers of light, softened by linen hangings to keep out drafts. Beds line the walls, each little more than a wooden frame with a straw-stuffed mattress and woolen blanket. Privacy is not the point here, comfort is. The smell of the infirmary is a mingling of clean straw, dried herbs, and a faint trace of beeswax from the candles. Even in daylight, a few candles burn steadily, their golden glow softening the shadows. At the far end of the room, a great hearth crackles in winter, its heat carrying the scent of wood smoke into the air. The infirmarian, often an older monk with steady hands and a knowledge of healing, moves quietly among the beds. His tools are simple, wooden bowls, mortar and pestle, small knives, linen bandages, and earthen jars filled with salves and tinctures. His medicines are drawn from the monastery's own garden, sage to ease sore throats, rosemary to strengthen the memory, chamomile to calm a troubled stomach, comfort to knit bones and soothe bruises. Here, the day moves more slowly than elsewhere in the monastery. The sick do not keep the same strict rhythm as the healthy. Meals are brought to them when needed, prayers are said softly at the bedside rather than in the chapel. The bell still marks the hours, but in the infirmary, it is a reminder rather than a summons. Some patients are here for only a few days, a fever from the damp chill of winter, a strained back from carrying heavy loads. Others remain for months or years. An aged brother whose hands tremble too much to write, a novice who survived an illness but lost his strength, a lay worker injured in the fields. The infirmary is not a place of exile, but of care. There is a small side chamber where the most fragile patients rest. It is kept warmer than the main hall, the windows shuttered against the cold. Here, the infirmarian may spend long hours, reading softly from scripture or simply sitting in companionable silence. In illness, words matter less than presence. Monastic healing draws on both practical knowledge and prayer. For the monks, to tend a body is also to tend a soul. At times, the infirmarian will anoint a patient with oil, murmuring blessings as he rubs it into tired limbs. At other times, he prescribes rest and a warm broth, or sends for a fresh bundle of herbs from the garden. Some monasteries keep small collections of medical texts, translations of ancient works by Galen or Hippocrates, copied in the Scriptorium. These books, bound in leather and smelling faintly of ink, are consulted when a rare illness appears. Every monk who enters the monastery knows, at least in his mind, that the life ahead will test him. But knowing and living are two different things. The trials of faith are not always the dramatic storms of doubt that songs and tales speak of. More often, they are slow, steady pressures, like water wearing away stone. Some trials come early, in the first years of monastic life. A novice may arrive full of zeal, imagining endless days of prayer lit by golden sunlight, only to find that much of monastic life is plain, repetitive labor. Weeding the garden in cold rain, mending the same robes again and again, copying page after page of scripture until the eyes blur, these tasks are not glorious, yet they are the marrow of the monastic way. It is here, in the quiet grind, that the first doubts can whisper, "Am I truly called to this?" Other trials creep in slowly. The rhythm of the hours can become so familiar that the prayers risk turning into mere habit, the lips moving while the mind wanders. A monk may sit in the chapel and realize, with a shock, that his thoughts are miles away, chasing some memory of his past life or imagining a future that will never come. To notice this is itself a small trial, for it forces the monk to face his own distractions. Then there are the trials that come from within the brotherhood. Even in a holy place, human nature remains. One brother's voice may grate on another, small disagreements over work or interpretation of rules may fester if left untended. The rule of Saint Benedict warns against murmuring, the quiet, constant complaint that can wear down the spirit. Yet even the most disciplined monk may sometimes feel that murmuring voice rise in his chest. There are trials that test the body, too. Illness can force a monk into the infirmary for weeks or months, leaving him restless, unable to serve as he once did. Age brings its own burdens, the joints stiffen, the hands tremble, the fasts become harder to bear. And with these changes comes the trial of humility, to accept help from younger brothers, to allow others to take up the work once done with ease. And still, there are the deeper, darker trials, those that strike at the very root of faith. A monk may pray for years without feeling the closeness of God he once knew. The joy that filled him in the chapel as a novice may fade into a dry and distant longing. This dark night of the soul, as some call it, is perhaps the hardest trial of all. It is a test of endurance, to keep praying when the heart feels empty, to keep believing when the senses find no proof. The monastery itself prepares for these trials in its own quiet way. The daily structure, the bells, the prayers, the work, is a net that catches the weary spirit before it falls too far. Even when a monk feels no devotion, the act of showing up to the choir stalls, of kneeling at the right time, of chanting with the others, keeps him in the current of faith. The final bell of the day rings low and slow, its deep tone rolling across the cloister like a wave on a quiet shore. It is the call to Compline, the last prayer before night swallows the monastery in stillness. For centuries, monks have ended their day with these same words, these same chants, letting the noise of the day fall away until only silence remains. The chapel is lit only by a few beeswax candles, their flames swaying gently in the evening draught. Shadows lean long across the stone floor, bending and shifting with each flicker of light. The brothers file in without a word, their sandals whispering on the worn flagstones. This is the most solemn of the hours, a prayer not to stir the heart into action, but to lay it to rest. Each monk takes his place in the choir stalls. The air holds the faint scent of incense from vespers, still lingering like a ghost. The abbot signals, and the chant begins, slow, low, and almost like a lullaby. Latin syllables rise and fall, weaving into the darkness like threads of gold in black cloth. The words of Compline are prayers for protection through the night, for rest of the body, and for the soul's safe-keeping should it not wake with the dawn. In Manus tuas, Domini, commendo spiritum meum, into your hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit. It is a line spoken every night, yet it carries the weight of a lifetime in every syllable. The day's labors, worries, and even the trials of faith that linger in the heart seem to fade here. In the stillness between verses, the silence feels almost alive, not empty, but full, like the quiet before snowfall. Each monk breathes the same still air, bound in a unity that words could never create. At the close of the chant, the candles are snuffed one by one, plunging the chapel into shadow. Only the sanctuary lamp remains, its small flame glowing like a watchful star before the altar. The abbot speaks the final blessing, his voice soft but sure, sending the brothers to their rest. The monks leave in single file, their robes rustling softly. Outside, the cloister walk is dim under the moon, its pale light silvering the stone arches. A night wind carries the faint scent of rosemary and damp earth from the garden. Somewhere far off, an owl calls. One by one, the brothers return to their cells. The narrow wooden doors close with quiet clicks, the sound echoing down the corridor like raindrops in a cavern. In each cell, there is little more than a cot, a crucifix, and a small table, yet here, a monk lays his head knowing it is enough. As silence deepens, it becomes something more than the absence of sound. It is a kind of prayer itself, a surrender of all striving, a trust that God will keep watch through the long dark hours. In this quiet, the centuries seem to fold together. The same Compline that was sung tonight was sung 100 years ago, and will be sung 100 years hence, by voices yet unborn. For some, Compline is the close of a single day, for others, it is the close of a lifetime. When a monk senses his final days approaching, the rhythm of prayer becomes even more precious. Each Compline may be his last, and the words, "Into your hands, O Lord," take on a deeper, almost trembling sincerity. The eternal silence, that moment when breath ceases and the soul steps beyond the veil, is not feared here. It is, in a way, the great Compline of life, the final act of laying down one's burdens, the final resting in the hands of God. The monastery, in all its discipline and peace, has been a long preparation for that hour. Tonight, as the moon climbs higher, the world outside the walls goes on, the wind in the trees, the river slipping through the fields, the stars wheeling slowly overhead. Within the cloister, all is still. No bell will ring again until lauds greets the dawn. In this stillness, it is easy to believe that time itself has paused. The monastery becomes an island in an endless sea of night, its prayers like a lighthouse beam sweeping across unseen waters. For the monks, this is not simply the end of the day, but a reminder of the end toward which all days move. Somewhere in the darkness, a single bell hangs silent in the tower, its great mouth waiting for morning. Until then, the whole monastery rests under the cover of the eternal silence, the peace that follows prayer, the stillness that is not empty but full, the quiet that whispers, "You are held." And so the day ends, as it has ended for generations, with the last note of the last chant still echoing faintly in the heart, and with the night stretching wide and deep beyond the cloister walls. The final word is not spoken aloud, but felt, a wordless amen to the long journey of faith.